Okay, good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Good? Excited to be here? All right, me too. My name's Stephen Watson, and I have the privilege of being the president and CEO here at the National World War II Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program as we open our latest special exhibit, the Walt Disney Studios in World War II. And we're going to start tonight, as we always do, by recognizing our World War II veterans, our home front workers, our Holocaust survivors. If we have anyone here, please stand or wave. I know we have many that are watching our live stream here tonight, but let's give them a round of applause for their service and sacrifice. You really are the inspiration for all that we do here every single day. I'd also like to recognize all other veterans, active duty military, and military family members who support those who support us. So please stand or wave from your seats. We thank you for continuing our nation's great legacy of service, and we're grateful to have you here with us tonight. So the museum is really, truly privileged to have an incredible network of supporters and partners who champion our work and our mission and help us carry out the important things that we do here every single day. And everybody in this room is part of that network. And I just want to recognize a few folks individually, and I want to start with members of our National Board of Trustees. I'm pleased that we have several that are here with us tonight. Our Vice Chair, Suzanne Metier, and her husband, Mike. Thank you, Suzanne, for being here. I think we have our treasurer, some may say one of the most important people at the museum, Jimmy Moore, and his wife, Lillian, I think are here also. Trustee and former chairman, Jim Corder, and his wife, Carmen, are here. Thank you, Jim and Carmen, for being here. I think we may also have Robert and Kiki Pretty here this evening, along with Jimmy and Pixie Reese. If you all are here, wave or stand. And I know for sure we have former trustee who goes back to almost the beginning, Virginia Weinman. Virginia, it was delightful to see you here tonight as well. And I'd hoped that we would have Paul Hilliard here, our World War II veteran, former chairman, but since he's not, I'm going to give him a hard time since he often gives me a hard time, and he went home for a nap this afternoon and didn't come back. So, Paul, if you're watching, I'm sorry, and you can give me in trouble tomorrow, but he is in town, and it was great to see Paul today, and I think many of you know that Paul is a World War II veteran who flew over 40 missions in the Pacific in a SBD Dauntless dive bomber like the one we have above me. And then also a board member, former president and CEO, my predecessor, and the current president and CEO emeritus, Nick Mueller, right here. So Nick, thank you for all you continue to do. And also, I think we have Dr. Alan Millett right there, our senior military advisor, noted historian and member of our presidential counselors. So, and also this evening, we're pleased to be joined by many of our Patriot Circle and charter members, as well as capital donors, program supporters. And when I say your involvement, your support advances everything we do here, I mean that sincerely, and never was that more evident in the last 3 years as we've gone through a very difficult period. And I said at our senior staff meeting this morning, a sheer sign of progress must be that yesterday came and went without me realizing that it was 3 years to the day that we had to close down the museum. So I was glad that that anniversary passed and we didn't think about it, and we're moving forward at this point, but we got through the last 3 years thanks to your dedication, your support, your generosity, and it makes these special evenings like this possible. So give yourself a round of applause, please. We have some donors I want to recognize that made this exhibition possible, the Walt Disney Studios in World War II. Several folks stepped up. First, I want to recognize our trustee Bob Merrick and his wife Sheryl. Thank them. True Wealth Advisors, LLC, and delighted that we have members from their team here tonight, Jim Perry and Charles Lee Simmons. Thank you, Jim and Charles, for your support of this. We greatly appreciate it. I know it's also very personal, given your mother's work for Disney and her early work as an artist. David DeVito, the Dale E. and Janice Davis Johnston Family Foundation, Richard and Kathy Ramsey, Bobby and Sheila Weil, who I think their son Rob is here tonight, and last but not least, our museum trustee, the Honorable Christine Whitman. So let's thank them for their support of this great exhibit. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not recognize our museum team, whose hard work made tonight possible. And you know, every exhibit, every program, every major event has its own sort of cadence and challenges and fun parts that come with it. And this was no exception. And I think it's fair to say that the efforts to get here tonight required great teamwork and commitment from just a really special and dedicated group of team members here. And I want to just personally recognize a few of them. Corey Graff, who you'll hear from in just a few moments. So thank you, Corey. Tom Schertz, who's hanging out in the back of the room because he doesn't want any recognition, but thank you, Tom. Corey Doran, who's only been with us a few weeks, and literally her time at the museum, I think, has been spent on this exhibit, so thank you, Corey. Our curator, Josh Schick, who I think today might be heading to the Pacific on one of our tours. Terry Armand, Aaron Clancy, our AVP of Curatorial Services, and really the entire team in collections management, AV, security, and facilities who pitched in to make this possible over the last few weeks. So many thanks to all of you. Job well done. So it's really a pleasure for us to be able to bring this exhibit, the Walt Disney Studios in World War II, to New Orleans. I think, as you all know, our mission is to tell the story of the American experience in World War II, why the war was fought, how it was won, and what it means today, so that all generations will understand the price of freedom and be inspired by what they learn. And next year, will mark, amongst other anniversaries, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. And I think we're also cognizant of the fact that with each day that passes, we lose more and more of the men and women whose service and sacrifice made it possible for the way of life that we enjoy today. So we know going forward, it's even more important that we find ways to encourage new audiences to explore the lessons, the legacies, and the stories of the war. It's vital that if we're going to keep this history alive, we have to stay relevant and we have to do special things to broaden our appeal. And I think you will all agree, by the fact that you're here tonight, that there may be no other single topic that resonates broadly with children than adults than Disney. But as you're going to find out tonight, the story of Disney and the Walt Disney Studios in World War II goes much deeper than the beloved characters and films that have become such an iconic part of American pop culture. And you'll see in the exhibit, if you've been in already or after the program tonight, propaganda posters to animation shorts promoting the support for the Allied war effort, to even designing unit insignia. The Walt Disney Studios played an important role as a morale builder and a means of communicating war-related issues for both civilian and military audiences. So through Disney's example, we hope you'll walk away with a deeper understanding of how dramatically the war impacted all aspects of American life and how companies and individuals of all kinds used their talents to support the fight for Allied victory. We are incredibly fortunate to have with us tonight a man who's dedicated many years of his life to exploring this subject, Kent Ramsey, the curator of the exhibit, and he's going to be talking a little bit more tonight about the creative process that took to put this together. But Kent, thank you for being here from the Pacific Northwest for this opening night. Let's give Kent a warm New Orleans welcome. Kent has an extensive background with both World War II history and Disney. Since 1986, he has worked with World War II veterans at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, where he is currently a trustee and board secretary. He has many personal connections to Disney. I think he navigated keelboats on the rivers of America and the Magic Kingdom theme parks. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that later, so I won't say too much more about that. But for the last 15 years has conducted research for this exhibit at the National Archives, at the National Museum of the United States Air Force, the Boeing Company Archives, the Imperial War Museum, the Walt Disney Archives, the Walt Disney Archives Photo Library, and the Walt Disney Animation Research Library. Say that 10 times quickly. And I think you'll agree that the exhibit reflects your dedication and the extent of the research and the work that you've done. So thank you, Kent, for your work and helping make this possible here at the National World War II Museum. And for tonight's program, Kent will be joined on stage with my colleague for an interview with Corey Graff, who joined the museum as a curator in 2021. Thank you for traveling across the country to come to New Orleans in the middle of COVID. Corey is a graduate of the University of Oregon, is currently getting his master's in World War II studies from Arizona State University. That's a unique program produced in partnership with our museum. In the past, he's worked at the Museum of Flight, the Flying Heritage and Combat Armor Museum. He's written 10 books. He's worked in museums for more than 26 years. He started as a child, clearly, and is a regular contributor to history and science publications. And his primary professional focus is his interest in aviation during World War II. So with that, give a warm welcome to Kent and Corey to have a chat with us tonight.
It's on.
Testing.
Thank you, Stephen, for that introduction, and thank you for coming all the way from Seattle, Kent. Are you ready to do this? Look at all these people out here.
I'm more than ready.
So throughout my career, I've had an interest in the home front. I actually wrote a very small book on Southern California during World War II, and it's sort of a great collision between pop culture, wartime, and the society, the American society. And of course, Disney is part of that. So I'm very excited to have the Walt Disney Studios in World War II exhibit here, and to interview my good friend and the curator of that exhibit, Kent Ramsey. So I'm gonna dive right in here. Now, tell us about these keel boats. Tell us about working at Disney.
Before I do that, though, I want to say one thing, and it's a pleasure to be here. Had a great day today, answered a lot of good questions. But my father was in a Sherman tank during World War II, and talking to you guys and seeing a Sherman tank in the background is very rewarding for me. But my father would say that's not a real Sherman tank because he was in an M4A3 with a 105 howitzer, and that only has a 75 millimeter gun. So that's what he would say if he was still alive in here. But anyway, that's the way I want to open up. But my background as far as Disney history goes way back. Some people in the room might remember back in the old days, every Sunday night, I couldn't wait to race into the living room to watch Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color on our black and white television set. And I would watch that every Sunday night. And I remember one series that was on, it was all about Davy Crockett. And I got a coonskin cap and I got a rifle and I'd run around the neighborhood being Davy Crockett. Well, you fast forward 20 years, and the next thing you know, I'm at Walt Disney World, I'm on the rivers of America, and I'm a keelboat skipper, and I'm Davy Crockett. So they paid me a lot of money just to tell corny jokes and entertain people and take a boat around the river. But that's kind of how I got started with Disney. And believe it or not, when I was in Florida, the host, as far as where I lived every night, was the attorney for Walt and Roy Disney. He purchased all the land for Walt Disney World. 27,440 acres. And he would tell me Disney stories at night, tell me what Walt was like, what Roy was like, and everything else. So I had a really rich beginning with Disney, and then my brother worked for Imagineering, so a lot of background there. And so anyway, that's where I get this deep sense as far as Disney interest, and I've worked with them off and on over the years since then.
So of course, the other aspect of this is we've got the Disney part, World War II. So your father was a tanker. Now, was there other people in your family who were involved in World War II?
Yeah, my interest in World War II specifically, it was my dad in the Sherman tank, but my uncle was in a P-38 in the Pacific and European theaters of operation, and unfortunately my uncle was killed on April 8th of 1945, and he started flying for the U.S. Army Air Force would be April, or no, it would have been December 8th, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. So anyway, he had a long go of it, but didn't quite make it to the end of the war. And just to remind everyone, when you finish the exhibition, walking through it, please, at the end, there's a picture of my uncle. Pay your respects to him. That's why I did this whole thing. So anyway, thank you for that. And then growing up, I was surrounded by the greatest generation. My teachers all served in World War II. All the men in my neighborhood served, and I've grown up curating World War II stories my whole life. So that's a lot of background. And as Corey said, Stephen said, I've hosted a lot of World War II reunions over the years at the Museum of Flight and in other places around the United States. Yeah.
So now, so we're combining your two interests. How does the idea, the seed, the kernel for this exhibit come about?
Well, I would say it started 20 years ago, and believe it or not, it takes almost that long to curate or select and collect the objects that are in this exhibition. So the idea came to me that Disney, for my family anyway, they designed the insignia for my uncle's squadron and his photo group. And that's a big deal for our family. We're still proud of that. And after you dig into it, get all the details, you find out that Disney did it for free. And they answered requests from privates all the way up to generals. So it wasn't just officers that were supposed to or could ask for the designs. So to me, I wanted to put together an exhibition describing that and then all the other things that Walt Disney did during World War II. I thought it'd be a great educational exhibition. But it's taken a long time to collect all the objects that are in the room over there. So, and I hope you get to appreciate those.
So now, Kent, Disney is a monolithic company. And they get pitches all the time, I'm sure. How did you go about pitching this to the company to get their cooperation?
That's a great question. Because I worked there before, I broke the ice by telling a few keelboat jokes, and they liked that. And that broke the ice. But then I submitted a very detailed outline as far as what I wanted the exhibition to be like. And I submitted it to the manager of the archives. And then a couple weeks later, I got an email back from her, and she said, we have a Disney executive that'll be in Seattle next week. Do you want to meet with him? I said, sure. And so I met with him, took him on a tour of the Museum of Flight, and the next thing, he invited me down to Burbank, California, met with him down there, and then we ran into a roadblock. And they said, we want to green light this, but we have another entity that wants to do the same thing you're doing, and it was the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco. So I just looked at him, I said, why don't we just do it together? And he says, you'd be willing to do that? And I said, sure. So hopped on the next flight to San Francisco, talked to them, and the rest is history. We did the exhibition together, and it was a real joy. Yeah.
So as I walk through, one of the things that stuns me and is going to stun these fine people when they get the chance is just the sheer volume of materials that's in the exhibit and just the magnitude. So was this difficult to put together?
Yeah, difficult isn't the right word. It is almost impossible. But what I did is the objects, originally I had 990 objects and had to whittle it down to 550. But when you go through the exhibition, there are pieces from obviously the Disney Company, the Walt Disney Family Museum, private collectors, my collection, people from all around the United States. And as I said earlier, some of those objects were impossible to find just about as far as some of the insignias that I wanted. I wanted a mint condition Vanilla insignia patch. Well, I waited 15 years to find one. I wanted a Gremlins puzzle. I couldn't find a Gremlins puzzle as far as made by Jamar until about 5 years ago, but I was looking because people have them, but not with all the pieces. I mean, it was just a bunch of crazy things that my vision was I wanted this all to come together, and I finally reached that point, so, yeah.
So now you mentioned collecting from, getting material from private collectors, which I assume there's some quite characteristic, or some characters within that realm. And Kent, are you one of those characters?
Indubitably. Yeah, I should also mention when he talks about characters, I was goofy for a few days when I was at Walt Disney World. I've got the right physique and right IQ for him. Gouache. So anyway, but no, the people that I worked with, even at the Disney company, when I showed up, I was at the Animation Research Library, and the guy showed up as a leprechaun because it was St. Patrick's Day. And then other people would dress up like they worked at the Polynesian Village or something. And it was always fun to see what people wore to work when I was down at Disney and even at the Walt Disney Family Museum. And then some of the collectors, I mean, they're famous animators, directors, everybody that collects Disney art. I met a lot of characters there too. Wonderful people that had pieces of artwork that I didn't even know existed as far as saving from that time period.
So as you dove in, what struck you about Disney during World War II? What are the things that you learned? What are the big takeaways?
I think the biggest takeaway for everybody here tonight, as far as after the exhibition, is people need to realize that Disney dedicated over 90% of their production to the war effort in World War II. Most people have no clue that Disney did that. And they produced, as we know, entertainment, education, training, and propaganda films, as well as insignia designs and massive print media. So as you go through the exhibition, you're going to see all that, and it's pretty impressive as far as what they did. Yeah.
So you've been working on this for years and years, and you sit here in front of all these people at the final showing of Walt Disney Studios in World War II. How do you feel?
I'm sad, and I'm glad that I've kind of reached the end of it as far as I can start on some other projects. But I think this is the best final destination. I always had this museum in mind as far as having the exhibition here. And the joy as far as putting this together, I've met so many great people all across the United States that I never would have met if I hadn't come up with this idea and persevered. So that's a really good thing. And one other thing that I should probably bring up is there's this guy named Donald Duck, and he sent this message to me, a cryptic voice message. It wasn't a text, it was a voice message. And he just said, and he said, "Have a good time tonight."
Well, thank you so much for joining us. At this point in the program, we'd like to open up the floor to our in-person and online audience for questions for Kent. If you're viewing this on Vimeo, Facebook, YouTube, please place your questions in the comments in the video. And if you've joined us from New Orleans, we will have a staff member hand a microphone around to you. We're searching. Does anyone have a question? Does anyone want to raise their hand?
Before we entertain any questions, too, be aware that I'll be in the exhibition tonight, and I'll be here tomorrow to answer any and all questions for everybody. So, and there's no such thing as a dumb question. Okay, I love it. I already took your picture tonight. The guy with the Mickey Mouse ears on. God, I love this.
I'll ask you the same question that I asked earlier that I'm sure other people would like to know. Is it possible to view some of the videos and the instructional, the inspirational videos that Walt Disney did during the war today, right now? I remember seeing one when I was a young child during a documentary or something. Is it possible to view those today?
The answer is yes, but it's not. The easy way to see them is actually on YouTube. You can pick up almost everything there. but it's not great quality. But in 2004, Disney released a 2-disc set as far as World War II. It's called On the Front Lines. They have 32 films on it, and that's a great thing to go through as far as learning more about the company and everything that they did during World War II. But, you know, a poor man's way is just to check out YouTube, and you can find almost everything. Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Question over here.
Oh,
Right here,
I'll go over here.
Thank you.
Oh, no, it's William, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The notion that Disney influenced the U.S. Army in World War II is non-negotiable. It absolutely did. I believe that can be traced to influence on the U.S. Army today. If you go to a U.S. Army manual today on how to change a transmission, you will see cartoon figures changing that transmission to learn from. And so I think that the notion that cartoons, how they relate to young people, and how young people are soldiers or airmen or Marines, and they use that to their benefit today, you can trace that line. Could you comment on that, please?
I would agree 100% as far as Disney's probably responsible for, and understand that Disney is experimenting with this before the war started, but it's fascinating as far as they did a number of tests, and they put live people in front of the servicemen and watched them as they were going through the films, and most of the guys were falling asleep. And then they said, well, let's try animation, teaching the same subject, and everybody's like this, and and they discovered that the servicemen were basically at the level of a 4-year-old as far as, I want to watch a cartoon. I don't want to watch some boring guy up here on stage like me, So that's how they really, and then the training manuals, everything else, they would use animation, and it got people's attention, and Disney really pushed that hard, and I would have no doubt that they started that whole process. Thank you for the question.
In the back and to your left.
Hi, given your family knowledge experience, was there something specific that jumped out to you that was new as far as knowledge that you learned over this experience and process?
Something, as far as the experience itself, was there something new? Restate that again, please.
Absolutely. Something that you had never, I guess something new that you learned along the way, or something that jumped out to you, I guess.
Yes.
Given that you had a lot of knowledge from your family or, experience, learning all that.
Yeah, there's several things. One would be, it was very moving for me when I was going through the archives. I spent several days at the Disney archives, and they were wonderful as far as letting us do everything we wanted to as far as the research. And what I, of course, wanted to do is I wanted to find the original request letter that they wrote for my uncle's squadron design. And I found that as a Western Union telegram. And so things like that, that was just very moving to me, and it was very special. But I would say the biggest thing that surprised me, though, as far as doing all this work and going all around the country, was actually getting to the Animation Research Library and seeing the original artwork that's locked away, and seeing how good the artists were that worked at Disney. We all know they had great artists, but you look at some of the background paintings and things like that, and they're just out of this world. And nothing like that exists today. It was wonderful.
So we do have a question from our online audience, and it's a student named Samantha. She wants to know, who is your favorite Disney character?
I already answered that earlier. He's the one that sent me the voicemail. And by the way, Donald is my favorite character only because he is so well suited for World War II. He was a feisty little guy. He appeared in 216 insignia designs because he's a feisty little guy, and everybody wanted Donald Duck. It wasn't Mickey Mouse, sorry Mickey, but yeah. Mickey Mouse was good for the home front though, and good for the corporate image, yeah.
Another question right here to your right.
So what happens to this exhibit when it ends? So with all the materials and everything?
That's the sad part, because for me, it took all these years to pull it all together, and so many different resources, different sources, and it just, it all scatters to the wind again. This is probably the only time this material will ever be put together like this again. It's been very difficult. But yeah, that's a sad answer to that question. Yeah.
In the back and to the far left.
Hi, how you doing? My name is Kevin with the Magic Our Way podcast. So again, thank you for doing this. We're definitely excited to see this exhibit. And I'm curious if you could enlighten us as to some of the artist names that we're going to see in this exhibit. We know that like Disney has a history of just incredible artists in their stable. Could you give us a little idea of whose work we're going to see?
Yes, that's a good question. And understand that Disney basically had this philosophy that every piece of artwork that I looked at, the artist did not sign it. It's you work for the company and it's Walt Disney art, it's not so-and-so's art. So a lot of the pieces that I looked at, I'm not sure who the original artist was, but a lot of them you look at the styles and you can easily pick out who it was. For example, Disney had his top 9 animators. They were called the 9 old men. And so you can look at those drawings and pick out, you can see that one's Ward Kimball, or you can look at one and say it's Frank Thomas, things like that. So the original 9. And then there are a few that Bill Titley had a certain style. So that's how you figure out who they were. But we have a pretty good representation of all the top artists that were at the studio in the 40s and 50s. And that was the golden era as far as the Disney animation.
We have another question here in the center.
I know this is a very fitting end here at the National World War II Museum, but is there any way that this can continue to travel across the country? Because this is a wonderful exhibit.
I've had that question 500 times in the last 2 weeks. If you look at it, though, it kind of makes sense. There's a possibility it might go to one other destination, but the problem is that we have a lot of different collectors that loaned us their art, and they're now wanting their art back. And it's not the Disney company that is necessarily in that category, but justifiably so. I mean, I've got I think 75 pieces in the exhibition. I've got blank places on my walls that are kind of like, when are you going to fill those up again? But that's the limiting factor there as far as why it can't. And we've had about 3 or 4 other museums desperately ask us for the exhibition. So you guys are lucky because you were competing with a number of other museums and you just were ahead of everybody else. So cheers for you.
So 2 questions. First, we learned in our docent training that Disney hired a number of female artists to replace the men artists that went off to war. And so the question is, were the females paid the same as the men for doing the same work? Second question is a little easier. Were any of the characters that Disney introduced during the World War II films, did they make it into any of his future feature films or anything that came in after the war?
Yeah, 2 questions. The first one is very interesting to me as far as the female stepping into the roles as far as men went into the service. I think it was almost 300 men ended up going either enlisting or getting drafted. And so that created a great opportunity. At Disney, prior to the war, about 95% of the women were in the ink and paint department, and the others were administrative as far as secretarial. So there weren't female animators, except for Retta Scott. And then there was Mary Blair, who was a color stylist. So anyway, and this is very important, as the war continued, more and more women stepped up into the animation roles. And it was true at corporations across the country as far as women were stepping up into roles that were filled typically by men. The big difference with Disney was that after the war ended, guess what happened at the other corporations? They all got pushed out. The guys are back. You're out of a job. Too bad. But Disney maintained the women as far as in those management roles. So the celluloid ceiling was broken at that time. And he was ahead of his time a little bit, Disney, as far as his philosophy and letting women take more management roles. Now, as far as the pay goes, I don't think that they were paid exactly the same, but they got a huge pay bump. I can't confirm for sure that it was exactly the same. Yeah. And your second question was the...
Did any of the characters
during
the war make it into feature films later?
That's probably the best question I've had all day, because it's very thoughtful. What happened is when I was talking a few minutes ago about Disney designing 1,200 insignias, they had to come up with characters that were from all, the stable of general characters they already had, but they had to design new characters. And so what happened is you study the designs of these early insignia, you look at films that are come along later along, Beauty and the Beast or, the Little Mermaid and things like that. The animators go in and they study things at the Animation Research Library, and they picked up some of these designs, and lo and behold, this character that's in an insignia, you see him appear in a cartoon, 40 years later, 50 years later. So that was a terrific question, though. Yeah.
So from our online audience, Susan asks, what is an artifact that you were searching for but couldn't get your hands on?
None. That's why it took me 20 years. Sorry, but that's... There were several that I've already mentioned that I was just determined to find. The good example is the Fifanella patch or insignia, one that was in mint condition. That was impossible to find. I finally got it. There's several things as far as art pieces that I thought I'd never find, and I found them. And so, to be honest, there isn't anything there that, and I found a lot of things I didn't think that existed. For example, the Thatch Weave training film. I didn't think any of the artwork existed from that training film. And lo and behold, I'm going through a collection at a guy's house, and he has the storyboard for the Thatch collection, the Thatch Weave. And I'm going, oh boy, this is fantastic. So, yeah.
We have one question to your right. We have a young lady right here.
What was your favorite art piece in the museum?
What was my favorite art piece?
Art piece, yes.
Boy, God, that's a tough one. Yeah, I kind of like there's a drawing in there. It's before it's transferred to a cell, but there's a drawing of Donald Duck dressed up as kind of like very patriotically. And I was really happy to find that. It's a nice drawing. It's in there right now, but that's probably one of my favorite pieces. Yeah.
So for our final question of the evening, to the front and your left.
Thank you. Again, thanks for coming. Has there been any thought, discussion, or whatever, towards around making this a permanent exhibit at either Disney World or Disneyland?
That would be difficult, and I'll tell you why. Because the Disney company doesn't want to be known as a war company or a defense contractor and that sort of thing. So they're in a different mode right now than they were in World War II. So I don't think that they would. They celebrate and they really support this exhibition, but I don't know if that's what they want to be known for as far as part of their corporate image. Yeah. Yep.
Well, Kent, I think that I kind of feel like I'm standing in the way. We're standing in the way of these people getting to go see all of your work. So I think it might be time to wrap it up. What do you think?
Yes, and I believe that's true.
So as you leave the U.S. Freedom Pavilion, please stop by the Senator John Alario Jr. Special Exhibition Hall and see this wonderful exhibit.
Thank you very much.
For those of you watching online, we encourage you to come to New Orleans and see this Walt Disney Studios in World War II exhibit. It's here through September 24th of 2023. Thank you all for coming. Take care, and we'll see you next time at the National World War II Museum.